Hello everyone, and welcome back to the K through 8 General Music PLC. Ariel Robbins here, your PLC lead for the year. In this topic, we'll be talking about classroom management. And like we discussed in the first topic, our webinars this year are going to be divided into 3 segments each. So this first segment is all about classroom procedures and routines. So let's get started. First, let's talk about why these are important. You might think, well, it's just kind of second nature to have kids come in and kids taking attendance, or maybe you don't take attendance, and hopefully I can persuade you why that would be important. But throughout their day, kids have structure, especially during the school day when it's very heavily scheduled. And so having that structure and having something to rely on and kind of be able to predict what's coming next really helps kids feel really more comfortable in their learning environment. So if you change your procedures every single week, that might get the kids a little bit on edge and they won't really know what is coming next. Whereas if you have procedures that we'll talk about in the next slide of boom, we do this, and then boom, we do this, and then boom, we do this, the kids will be more comfortable coming into your classroom because they'll know what's going to happen, even if they don't know exactly what activities there are going to be for that day. Routines and procedures also help you so that you are not worrying about how do I get my kids to come into the classroom or how do I distribute instruments. If you have a predictable routine and procedure for that, then your mental energy can be focusing on the lesson and the procedure of the day rather than those minutiae of how you're going to proceed through your lesson plan. It also helps you make the classroom more efficient during the class period, because for a lot of us, we only have them maybe once a week for 45 minutes, or maybe you have them 4 days in a row for 45 minutes and then not again for several weeks. Maybe you're in a middle school general music setting where you have them every day for 50 minutes and then not again for the rest of the school year. So we have precious little time with these students, is what I'm trying to say. And if we have these routines and procedures in place, then we can go through our lesson as efficiently and effectively as possible and not have to waste time on those minutiae of passing out instruments and lining up and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of talks about why these are important. Now let's talk about how you can structure your routines and procedures in your classroom. Many of you are probably already doing this. Maybe all of them, maybe some of them. I just want to give you some things to think about. It starts right away, before your kids even enter the classroom. I've seen teachers who have a piece of music playing in the classroom, meet their students at the door, and do some sort of march-in activity. Great procedure. I've seen teachers have their door open, and their classroom teachers will just allow their students to come in and go straight to their spots. If that's the same procedure you do every day, every week, great procedure. Personally, I like meeting my students at the door, kind of doing that transition between the classroom teacher to myself to let them know, okay, now you're in Miss Robbins' kind of control and you're in my classroom now, and kind of giving them a heads up of the very first thing that we're doing after our beginning of class procedures to kind of get them mentally prepared for the activity of the day. So think about what consistent procedure you want for how your students enter the classroom. There are a million different ways to do it, but as long as you choose one and make it consistent, then it will be effective for you. Another thing I strongly suggest, if you're not doing already, is seating charts. And there are a million reasons why I suggest doing seating charts. Yes, it's a little bit more work on the upfront side where you have to write down the names and you have to kind of configure where you think the students would be best placed. But once you have that set, it solves a lot of potential headaches for you down the road. My number one recommendation for doing seating charts is that it helps us learn the students' names. Often a lot of us have several hundred students in our classrooms in the week or in a school year, and we need to be able to learn their names because that's the most effective way and the quickest way to connect with a child is just to say, hey, Johnny, how's it going today? And know their name and know that they know that you know who they are. So seating charts help me a lot with that because I can just look up at the seating chart and look at that child and know that that's who they are. And that helps me internalize their names. And so after a couple weeks of that, I've got it set in my head. Another reason for seating charts is because it can help you kind of separate students who may need to be separated, or on the flip side, having a seating chart and allowing students to sit next to someone who they want to sit next to can be a great incentive. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in segments 2 and 3, but I have, for my older grades, I have 2 separate seating charts. One that I call my seating chart, where I have them separated out, and then what I call their seating chart and their chosen seating chart, and they get to sit next to who they want to sit next to. Can be a great incentive. Going along with seating charts, if you don't already take attendance, I would recommend doing this, and a great way to have this built into your routines and procedures is to do a musical attendance. The following is a clip of how I do a musical attendance as a vocal warm-up at the beginning of my music classes.
Hello, 4th grade. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, Miss J's class. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, people who had a good weekend. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, people who brought their computers today. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, people who did not bring their computers today. Hello, 4th grade. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, Miss J's class. Hello, Miss Robin. Hello, Rishi. Hello, Megan. Hello, Wong. Hello, Drew. Hello, Graham. Hello, Anastasia. Hello, Krithik. Hello, Alex. Hello, Miles. Hello, Ian. Hello, Jeet. Hello, Ruthvik. Hello, Jordy. Hello, Celine. Hello, Kathy. Hello, Michael. Hello, Delilah. Hello, Bronson. Can you wait until after attendance? Hello, Naomi. Hello, Tommy. Hello, Sky. Hello, Alexis. Hello, Kylie. Hello, Milena. Hello, Irene. Hello, Camille. Hello, Kevin.
He's not here yet.
Hello, Bella. Hello, Tiffany. Hello, Campbell. Hello, Grace. Hello, 4th grade.
Hello, Miss Robin.
Hello, Miss J's class.
Hello, Miss Robin.
Another thing you want to think about is how you organize and store your instruments. This is twofold. One, it's so that the students are not directly on top of the instruments on their seating chart, so it's kind of out of reach and they can't just be messing with your instruments the entire time during class. But on the flip side, you also want to have it in a space that's accessible for tiny humans. So that means not on too high of a shelf and not hidden away somewhere where they can't find them. Because as we pass out instruments, it's easier and quicker if students can access them themselves. So here is a picture of my classroom and how I store my instruments. So here is my basic rhythm instrument setup. You see I've got this great cart. It's got these removable boxes so that I can wheel the whole cart out, or if there's a particular instrument or group of instruments that I want to use that day, I can just take those boxes out and lay them on the floor and maybe say group 1 come get rhythm sticks and group 2 come get egg shakers, and then we'll switch. I also have this set up for my boom whackers, where I just have them in white trash cans that I got, at the local grocery store. And I also have black trash cans for my chromatic add-ons for boom whackers, because I am a nerd. Yes, the white keys are in the white and the keys are in the black. That's correct. I also have these great leaning shelves in my classroom. They're built-ins, and I have placed my hand drums and tambourines on there. I realize that not every classroom has these leaning shelves built in, but I just wanted to show you an example of how those instruments could be stored in a way that's still accessible for students, but also out of the way. And then here is my pitched instrument setup. I've got my xylophones, and I'm lucky to have a class set of ukuleles. My custodial staff hung these 2x4s up on the wall for me, and I was able to get a class set of the hooks as well. And so the top shelf is a little high, but my 5th graders are the only ones who play the ukuleles, and my tall kids are tall enough to get them down on their own and pick them up on their own. And then my xylophones, I want to do a close-up of the wall because, as you can see, I've got labels on the carts as well as labels on the walls. So I call these the parking spots. And I've taught my students how to put the instruments away on their own as well as getting them out on their own. And I've also taught them, you know, the difference between soprano and alto and bass so they know which instrument goes to which parking spot. And then, as you can see, I've got numbers taped on the side of my xylophones as well, and that is because each instrument has its own mallet, and so I have corresponding mallet buckets, so I can just tell my students if I don't have time to set up the instruments ahead of time, which I usually try to do, I can say, you know, go to the alto instrument and get the mallets you need for that instrument, and they know to go to bucket number 2 for the mallets that work best with the alto xylophone. Sometimes we mix it up, but in general, those mallets work best for that instrument. Along those same lines, you'll want to think about how you distribute those instruments during class. So as I'll show you in the following segment, I incentivize my students ahead of time before passing out instruments by reviewing the rules that if you play before I say, I take your instrument away. This reminds them that as soon as they get their instruments, it's not time to play yet. And mostly that's because I'm still giving out directions. And if they're playing their instruments, then they can't hear me as the teacher. That said, I will give them usually a bit of an experimentation time, whether it's 10 to 20 seconds, just to make some sort of noise on their instrument because they're excited to have them in their hands, and I get that. So think about how you can call certain groups of students at a time to come get their instruments and how you can remind them not to play the instruments as you're distributing them in class. So now that you've gone through your routines and your procedures and you've taught your lesson, now it's time to line up. I've seen a lot of classroom setups, and this goes back to the instrument storage issue, where the instruments are right next to where the students might want to line up. And of course, that could spell trouble because while they're trying to line up and get prepared to leave the classroom and be quiet for the hallway, they're touching the instruments. So one thing you can consider is where your line placement is. I have tape lines on my floor, and I have 2 alternate lineup setups for my students, depending on where our equipment is that day and how I want them to line up that day. If it is easier to have them line up next to the instruments, I will always make a comment beforehand to say, we are looking for self-control. Now is not the time to play the instruments, and giving them that preemptive reminder helps them to line up without being disruptive for the rest of class. So in my classroom, I have these tape lines on the floor near the door to show the students exactly where I want them to line up. I have them line up 1 row at a time, and so they make a nice orderly line, and they're not all rushing to get there first. Usually I will have them line up on this red line, and against this wall is where I have that leaning shelf and a lot of other shelves, but notice that it's a few tile squares away from that, so that puts them out of arm's reach of touching the instruments. You can see over here I've got this gold corner, so along this is the opposite side of that wall. So the wall is not long enough for an entire class to line up from the red line to the wall at the front of the room. So I've got this gold corner to kind of remind them, you know, if they're lining up, instead of smooshing all the way to the wall, to turn the corner here and the line just has a bend in it. There are some times where we have something going on this side of the room. Maybe that's why I've got my instruments set up for the day and they're like right on top of where the kids would normally line up. I do have an alternate lineup spot, and sometimes I'll say line up against the rubber ducky line, And it's a weird thing in my classroom. I collect them, it's decorated, whatever. So then I have this duct tape on the wall, no pun intended, and you can see it is lined up against where I store my xylophones, but again, it's a couple tile squares away. Another trick about this is that you can see that I've left space from around the door so that I can access the door. A lot of the times the kids otherwise would line up right against the door, and then I myself as the teacher would be squished and wouldn't be able to get to the door to open the door. So that was a trick I taught myself a couple of years ago, was just to put that lineup spot a little bit away from the door so that you have room to walk around the class and get to the door. This has been Classroom Management Segment 1, Routines and Procedures.